New video just in. We're going to show you right here to CNN. President Trump's special envoy to Ukraine, Keith Kellogg, meeting with Ukrainian President Zelensky in Kyiv this morning. And just moments after this meeting, the Ukrainian Air Force issued a warning of a missile threat across the entire country of Ukraine. All of this comes as we are standing by this morning for President Trump to meet with the NATO Secretary General at the White House in just hours, as he is teasing a major statement, his words, about Russia coming today. Details on that announcement so far not known. But when asked about the bipartisan Russia sanctions bill being pushed by Congress, but waiting for the president to give the green light, President Trump said, quote, we will see. Joining me right now is CNN's senior military analyst, retired Admiral James Stavridis. He's also the former Supreme Allied Commander of NATO and a partner at the Carlyle Group. Admiral, thank you for being here. You called on President Trump to stand firm with NATO, with the Secretary General in town. What would you like to hear that would give you confidence that he is doing that?
I am very happy at the moment of the U.S.-NATO role. We're on the back of the NATO summit, where almost every one of our European allies agreed to a 5% of GDP. That's more than we spend in terms of GDP. We spend about 3.5. So Europe is waking up to the need to meet the defense spending. So with that as backdrop, here comes the Secretary General, Mark Rutte. I know him well. He's a 14-year prime minister of the Netherlands. He has managed the Trump account quite well. And here's the point, Kate. What I'm watching for is Mark Rutte to say, in the presence of the president, yes, we are going to take the weapons systems that the United States is going to provide to Ukraine. We will purchase them and we will send them on to Ukraine. It's a very nice win-win. That's the key thing to watch as this visit unfolds.
What weapons would be most helpful right now? If the president announces it is only defensive weapons, is that enough? Do you think it would be necessary that the president make that shift to, announcing more offensive weapons going in?
I do believe it is important in that announcement. Again, that's what we'll be listening for, is to move beyond strictly defensive weapons, such as the Patriot missiles, which are the air defense systems that the Ukrainians desperately need. But what I would like to see is a provision for the United States to send more Harpoon missiles to go after the Black Sea Fleet, more HIMARS, surface-to-surface weapons that can reach deep behind Russian lines, more offensive cyber capability, and Kate, maybe some more F-16 aircraft, all of which are very capable offensively. I think that is what could move Putin to the negotiating table, which is what we want on our side.
And that kind of also begs the question I would love your perspective on. Ambassador Volker was on with me just last hour, and he noted the shift in President Trump's tone towards Putin, saying that he thinks that Trump is realizing that there is no other way than this kind of pressure on Putin, and how he has consistently said in the past week, at least, he is disappointed with him. What do you think's behind the shift? Do you think it'll actually stick?
I do think it's going to stick. And the reason is not because we're maneuvering brilliantly over here. As usual, democracies take a while to get organized and create a unified front. But I think the reason it'll stick is because Vladimir Putin appears to be not smart enough to back down, meaning Putin will continue to provoke the president. I see that happening. If he does that, watch for real NATO unity, additional offensive weapon systems, the spending of $300 billion in Russian money that's parked in Western banks, and certainly that sanctions bill that Lindsey Graham is pushing. That will have the effect of keeping Putin backing up. That's what we need to see.
I'm going to turn, speaking of keeping up pressure, I want to turn to Iran, because you wrote a really interesting piece laying out what you believe it would really take to truly end Iran's nuclear program, essentially saying that the Iraq invasion in 2003 all over again would be necessary. How you put it is, so what would it actually require? Certainly more than the American people, their elected officials, and the military would be eager to undertake anytime soon. Talk to me more about why you think it would take that level of U.S. commitment to eliminate the threat.
Sure. Let's put our minds back in a time machine and go to 2003 when we truly, deeply, madly believed that Saddam Hussein had nuclear weapons, weapons of mass destruction. So we invaded. Turns out that was wrong, but it's a blueprint for what it would take to really dismantle. And if you look at those statistics, and I was a one-star in the Pentagon reviewing those plans, 300,000 troops, hundreds of warships, 2,000 combat aircraft, take over the country, track down every scientist, go to every laboratory. It's a huge undertaking, didn't turn out especially well. Now, here's the point, Kate. Iran is 4 times the size of Iraq. It's a huge country, has twice the population, 80 million to 40 million. So it's a much bigger undertaking. Point being, bottom line, if we don't want to do that, and I would argue we certainly don't, we ought to use negotiations. And by the way, this morning, the Iranians have indicated a willingness to come to the table. That's because they got punched in the mouth, as a famous boxer once said, everyone has a plan until you're punched in the mouth. The Iranians have been punched in the mouth. We don't need to invade the whole country. We need to get to the table, keep the pressure on, but not revert to that 2003 blueprint. Let's hope we can avoid that.
It was a really interesting read and definitely a walk back into the time machine, a necessary one. It's really great to have you, Admiral, as always. Thank you so much.
All right, developing this morning, we are waiting for what the president said would be a major announcement about Russia. The exact details are unknown, though President Trump himself said that he struck a deal with NATO to send U.S. weapons to Ukraine through the alliance. He will meet with the NATO Secretary General at the White House shortly. The president is also voicing new frustration with Vladimir Putin.
I am very disappointed with President Putin. And I thought he was somebody that meant what he said, and he'll talk so beautifully and then he'll bomb people at night. We don't like that.
Russian drones continue to strike Ukraine. This morning, the U.S. Special Envoy for Ukraine and Russia, Keith Kellogg, is in Ukraine to meet with President Zelensky. This all comes as the Senate has crafted a bipartisan bill that would impose new sanctions on Russia. Let's get right to CNN's Elena Treen at the White House with the latest on this. Good morning, Elena.
Good morning, John. Yeah, look, I mean, this announcement today, of course, is going to be a big shift from what we've seen the president and his posturing toward Russia be thus far. I'd remind you that I think the big picture here is throughout his campaign and even in the early months of his administration, the president has really said that he believed he could find a swift end to this war. And part of that, of course, was predicated on this idea that he believed he alone could negotiate with Putin and really get him to come around to finding an end to this war. Well, of course, that isn't happening. And we've seen the president in recent weeks really publicly, but I know privately behind closed doors, express these growing frustrations with Vladimir Putin and really arguing that despite everything that he says in their phone calls, it's not really translating into reality. And so instead, we're actually seeing him kind of take on a very similar posture to that of his predecessors, which is to try and arm the Ukrainians in their fight to continue to fighting off that invasion from Russia. Now, of course, one of the big things we're looking for today is what that major announcement that the president keeps teasing will be. But we do know, of course, that the NATO Secretary General, Mark Rutte, he is going to be at the White House earlier this morning or later this morning. And he's essentially going to be here, as we know that the president said last week that he has struck a deal with NATO to arm the Ukrainians through European allies. And the president has maintained now repeatedly that it's going to be the NATO allied countries that foot the bill. Take a listen to how he put it.
But we basically are going to send them various pieces of very sophisticated military, and they're going to pay us 100% for them. I haven't agreed on the number yet, but they're going to have some because they do need protection. But the European Union is paying for it. We're not paying anything for it, but we will send it. It'll be business for us, and we will send them Patriots, which they desperately need.
Now, the Patriot defense system that the president referred to there, that is something that the Ukrainians have repeatedly said is one of their #1 priorities, and really only the United States can help them in arming them with some of these weapons to really try to fight off this war in a way that they have been unable to do so thus far. And look, I think the key thing here as well, when he repeatedly is talking about having the European countries pay for this, that's because we know as well, a lot of the president's supporters are not very much eager to having him take on this position and having the United States continue to send weapons and aid to Ukraine. That's part of why he keeps emphasizing that so much. But look, what we're also looking for is whether or not the president is going to make any more movement when it comes to Russian sanctions. We know that Congress is moving closer to it. The president has said that he's very strongly considering it, but has not formally said whether or not he's actually going to get behind those, John.
Yeah, we'll have to see there. But the fact of these weapons being delivered however they get there, does represent a major development. Elena Trine at the White House this morning, thank you very much.